Oh, hello there. Today I'm bringing you a new video brought to you by On the Racks. Welcome. Uh, I messed that up, so I'm gonna undo this. I'm gonna redo this and bring it back around so that this video makes a little bit more sense. But yeah, hit you right up after the drop. All right. Hello. Now that you're here, I've already played that little bit intro. And I'm here to tell you that we're about to talk about this Reddit thread. And I'm going to look up, I'm going to read the title, and that's about most of all of it. After putting thousands over thousands of hours into MMORPGs, I recently came to a simple conclusion: what I really enjoy and why I enjoy certain games more than others. The TLDR of this thread is that what they've found out that they've realized is they enjoy combat most of all. And what I'm about to do in this video is talk about combat in multiple MMORPGs as best as I can. I have many hours in Vindictus, um, Warframe, Guild Wars 2, Black Desert, Final Fantasy 14. Now, within this thread, they talk about Final Fantasy 14, and that spurred me on to making this video, saying that they just dislike the combat. And while I personally do not dislike the combat, and I have talked about how I've played multiple MMORPGs that have varying types of combat, that I don't think combat is necessarily the main thing that hooks people into staying with MMORPGs. But yeah, so let's get right to it. So I believe there are three key pillars that really make a combat situation good in an MMORPG. There's the sound design, visuals, and then how the enemy interacts with you, the player. So first things off, we're going to start with sound design. The important part of sound is that you get the feeling of that impact, the weight behind every single hit, the sounds matching up with the animations. Yes, that does partially tie back into visuals, but that's not important. If you don't have a really good sound and something sounds flat, you can't really get a good feel for how it, well, feels. Bad sounded, like you can hear this in multiple things. Like if a sound feels off to you, the player, it's gonna hurt, and you'll be disconnected from the combat, taken out of the immersion that the game has tried so hard to put you in. If we take a moment to listen to some of the audio from various games, you can hear that crunch and that crisp, clean hit. Few of these MMORPGs I find have really good combat. Now that we've gotten a pretty good look at some nice high quality sounds, you can feel that impact of each explosion from the Gunbreaker's own attacks, and you can feel the weight of the Mystic's punches and kicks from Black Desert. The Gunbreakers from Final Fantasy 14, that is. These two games I feel have done really well in keeping that strong sense of like power in their attacks. At least for some of them. Others not so much. I'll show you, give a quite good example right here.
Okay, so up first we have the summoner. The summoner's spells visually look great, but the sound, I would say, is not as like explosive or bombastic as other casters with such large attacks visually. Then we move on to the newest class in Black Desert, the Corsair. And while visually it looks pretty cool, the sound effects leave a lot to be desired. It doesn't have like weight, although that might be intentional. The weight it might not exist be to promote a more like fluid water type class. But even then, the water itself, it doesn't really feel like it. You barely feel like you're hitting anything. Things just kind of die and they fall over. So that's the downside of these two. Okay, so we've covered sound and visuals somewhat. Well, actually, I kind of sat here talking about how sound and visuals need to go together, so they're not really separate at all. So they're the three pillars are actually two pillars with one of those pillars being sound and visuals as they interweave together to really create something. You can't have a really good visual from a giant explosion match with a little sound. It just doesn't work or feel good for anyone involved. Imagine if a Transformers Michael Bay movie with all its explosions and all the explosions were duck quacks. Yeah, probably not as it's probably extremely funny, but not as exciting. Anyway, move on to that third pillar, the true pillar that brings it all in. That isn't always necessary because games like Black Desert exist, and you just kind of grind mobs, and grinding mobs can be kind of fun. But how you, the player, interacts with your opponent. This can be achieved by adding a real sense of danger or the ability for your opponent to actually attack you and do damage to you. This is definitely held up in Guild Wars 2, uh, as you can see here. I'm going to probably have some footage playing here about Guild Wars 2, and it's gonna be cool. It's gonna be me dodging skills, doing some damage, interweaving attacks, and that combat feels good, fluid, fast, and it feels great that I get to battle enemies and they actually have, I don't know, functioning AI, because that's very important, functioning AI that do something. And then there's Final Fantasy 14, which isn't quite always great in this department, since dungeon runs can be a snooze fest. I'm gonna hope to actually have some dungeon footage. Then there's some trials, which I believe I should have trial footage up here too. That is gonna have some like more mechanics than dungeons, but that's not anywhere near the level of Savage rating, which should be playing here. I hope it better be. I mean, this is my video and I'm the one making it, so yeah, it's gonna be right here. Uh, I'll quickly go over something like I mainly play healer, and in this Eden 1 Savage raid, I am playing a healer and having to make sure I'm keeping everyone's health up while dealing damage myself. There will be mechanics to go through, positions to get to, making sure that I'm keeping tanks healed up well enough, making sure that I can revive people as needed when they go down. Yeah, it can get a little busy, a little hectic, but it's a dance you learn, and so that makes healing combat feel quite good as opposed to dungeon healing, which honestly I think I've played a dungeon and cast 3 heals in a whole dungeon because it was that easy. But, oh well, what are you gonna do? Such is life of Final Fantasy XIV. Make harder dungeons, Square. Please. Just a little bit harder. Challenge my healing prowess. I hope everyone enjoyed that little video. I know I didn't enjoy editing it somewhat because my speaking skills are at the level of a mole rat. But besides that, we can bring our conclusion to this video. Combat has been a pretty fun thing to talk about. Somewhat. Not really. Maybe. That's not important. But we can always remember that our 3 pillars of combat are sound, visuals, and interactions with your opponent. These have culminate to create an experience so fulfilling and joyous that when we beat those raid bosses, when we beat those epic encounters, when we destroy our enemies in PvP, it's amazing. It's the best thing in the world. It's one of our great accomplishments. Now, this is my first video, kind of first full edited video, and I'm going to say that the quality is pretty bad, but I promise the next video is going to be even better. I shouldn't make promises. All right, we're done here. Peace.